So our platform is functional, right? It's working exactly how we want, but we really want some sound effects, we want some particles, we want other things that will allow us to communicate what's going on with our platform. And we're just going to use the defaults for this stuff. We're not going to, bother making fancy particles or fancy sounds. There's other tutorials for that. But I want to show you the setup and how you can make something reusable for your state tree, because you're going to want to play sounds and particles for anything that is polished after a certain point. So let's look at how we can do that, and we're going to make it modular so you can reuse it in other state trees beyond this tutorial. So let's start off with sound. We want to create a generic task that can play sounds inside of our state tree. So let's think about our approach. When we run the task, I'm going to spawn a sound and play. I also think that for many actors, I may want the sound to move with my blueprint. So for example, with my platform, as it's going up and down, if we have a looping movement sound, we may want that sound to follow the platform. Maybe you have a click sound at the top of the platform when you step on it. You may not need that to follow the platform, or maybe you don't want it to. I think I want the option to do both. So we're going to make a variable. So let's say option for attaching the sound that the designer can turn on or off. The last thing is we may want the sound to stop playing when we enter the next state, but in some cases we may want the sound to continue playing. We've just spawned it in the world and we want it to keep going. I'm going to add another option for destroy at transition. I think between these two options and then the designer being able to specify a sound, that's plenty for our modular SpawnSound task, but you could always customize it with more features later if you want. I just want to show you the basic setup. So now that we know what we're trying to do, let's do it. We're going to make a new state task. So I'm going to do this in my folder because it is not specific to the weighted platform. Right click. We want blueprints, state task, state tree task blueprint. Select. We'll call this STT_spawn sound, because technically we're going to be spawning a sound and creating it. We're not just playing an existing sound, we're going to spawn it. So I just want to be very clear about what this thing is going to do. Control S to save, open it up. This is also the point where you want to think about what are the types of variables that you might need. What do you need to do your job? I'm going to hit the plus button. I know I'm going to need my context. So that's my actor object. Okay. I also think I'm going to need my sound to play, right? So what is the sound that we're trying to spawn and play in the world? And that's going to be a type of sound base. Object reference. This actor, let's mark this as context because this is going to be the owning actor. Again, check your spelling. And this one, the sound to play, this is a requirement. We can't really do anything. Like, how do we spawn a sound without knowing what sound to spawn? Doesn't make sense. So we're going to call that input. So this is required. And then for our two options, we want our is attached and our destroy at transition. So I'm going to make, first one is attached. So do we want this thing to stay attached while we play? Let's make that a Boolean. Since this is optional, like this is something that can customize, I'm going to make that editable with that little eyeball. Compile, save. We're going to default this to true. I think by default, let's make it attached. I think that's going to be the more common use case. And then let's make another variable. So hit the plus, and this is destroy at transition. And Boolean, do the editable because we want the designer to customize this in the tree. Compile, save, and we will also default this to true. That way we're cleaning up things and not leaving a lot of sounds in our scene by default. Compile, save. Let's start with our logic. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to override enter. So when we enter our state, receive our sound to play. And all I'm going to do is check to make sure that we've received something valid. Now this might be optional. I'm going to type in is valid. We're going to do the question mark. Since we have to assign something, this is probably unnecessary, but I just find this good practice in general to always check something. If you're sending in an object reference, we usually want to check that. Make sure we're not using something that's empty. So I'm just going to do that. Next, we're going to check if we are attached. So drag get attached, because the way that we spawn this sound in the world will depend on if we're spawning it as attached or if we're spawning it at a location. So we're going to have to split our functionality here. So is attached, we'll do branch, hook that up, move that up. And if we are attached, then we're going to spawn this attached. If we're not, we're going to spawn it at a location. So we're going to start with the is attached one first. So if we were marked as is attached, let's drag off of that, spawn sound attached. So in order to do this, we need our sound to spawn. We've already decided that in our input. So drag that in. So spawn the sound to play that we've already been provided, and attach to component. We need to figure out where we're attaching it to. I'm just going to attach it to the root component by default, meaning that on my weighted platform, it's going to attach right here to this default scene root. And we can get that pretty easily by just getting our context actor. So get actor, right? This is our BP weighted platform. Pull off of that and say get root component. And then from here, we can just plug this component into there. So this is where we're going to attach our sound. Scoot that over. One thing you might want to do is just check the defaults down here, but I don't think we need to mess with any of this, right? This is a relative location, so it should spawn on the thing, attach on the thing, and auto destroy. All right. So I did not mess with anything. I just want to show you, you could tweak some of that if you wanted. Let's move some of this over. Okay, once we spawn and attach, we want to save this reference because we may want to destroy it later. So I'm going to promote to variable this little return value, and we're going to rename this. New var is a bad name, spawned sound. So this is the sound component that we spawned. So we'll probably need that later when we destroy. Let's compile and save. I think it's worth pointing out that auto destroy is marked, but we may want to destroy it early. We may want to destroy it just in case. I just find it's useful to have that reference just in case we need it. And then the last thing you want to do is play it. I think it's usually set to autoplay whenever we spawn a sound, but just in case, we're just going to play it. There's nothing bad about just playing it, even though it's already set to auto activate, like it'll be fine. So just in case, we're going to pull off of our spawn sound, our little return node, and say play. Okay, so we'll play it if it wasn't already playing. I think that's reasonable. All right, so we have this part. Let's scoot that up. Now, if is attached is not true, that means we want to spawn it in the world. And I'm going to spawn at the location of the weighted platform. You could probably set up a variable that is editable for like a location. I think most of the time you're going to want to spawn at this location anyway, so I'm not going to bother with that, but you could if you wanted. Okay, so false. We're not attached. We're going to pull off spawn sound at location. Okay, and then the sound we want is still our sound to play. And our location is just going to be our actor's location. So we're going to drag in our actor, get, and we're going to get actor location. So we're getting the location of our weighted platform in the world by doing that. All right, pull that in. Again, you could check our defaults down here if you want, but I shouldn't need to mess with anything. Just wanted to show you in case something changes later. And then our return value, we're going to assign this to the same spawned sound reference, that this variable that we created later. Drag that in, say set. We're going to set this into this variable. Either way, whether we attach it or we spawn our location, we're going to assign it to our spawn sound variable. That way we can destroy it later if we want. And again, I'm going to pull off and play. I'm pretty sure this plays by default, but again, there's no harm in just being sure. Okay, so this should play it when we enter. We still have one more thing left to do when we exit. So override when we exit state. If we're marked for destroy, we want to destroy it. If we're not, then we don't do anything. So the first thing we're going to do is drag in our destroy, say get. So check this Boolean if it is marked true. So we'll do branch. The designer has decided they do want this to destroy, then let's destroy it. And the way to do that is we're going to get our spawn sound reference that we held on to earlier, say get, and I'm going to do a validation check. Because if we destroyed already, we finished our sound and destroyed, it's not going to exist anymore. And, I don't want to do anything. So we're going to do something called a validated get. What we did up here is we ran a function to validate. This is just another way of doing that to consolidate it into one node. So right click, say convert to validated get. And we are getting and check its validity in one go. So it's kind of useful to be able to do this. So connect that in. And if it is valid, meaning it still exists, we want to destroy it early since we're transitioning now. We're exiting the state. So I'm going to pull off my spawn sound and say stop under audio. So stop the sound and then destroy it. Let's just pull out of here. And we'll say destroy component. So stop the sound and then destroy it. Compile save, just double check your defaults. Is attached is true. Destroy transition is true. And I think this will do it for our functionality. So this is our spawn audio task, and it should be modular, right? Like nothing in here is weighted platform specific. We're just getting reference to the owning actor, which doesn't have to be the weighted platform, but we should be able to use this in other states in our state tree system, which is really good. Now we want to actually choose some sounds to play. Now I want to show you something. If we were to assign this inside of our state tree, like if we were going to, let's go to start sync. And if we wanted to add our play sound task, so our spawn sound right here, what this is doing is this is asking for a sound to play. So, you know, we don't really see anything over here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sounds on my actor. So on my weighted platform, I'm going to reference all the different sounds that I want to play. So make variables for those over here. And that's actually a better way to do it anyways. I don't really want to choose the sounds inside of the state tree, because then any state tree weighted platform, like any actor that uses the state tree, will use these specific sounds. For example, what if I wanted different kinds of weighted platforms? Like maybe I wanted a rocky weighted platform or a sci-fi weighted platform. If I did it this way inside of the state tree, I wouldn't be able to do that. I would have the same sound effects for anything that uses a state tree, and I'd have to make a totally different state tree, which is just unnecessary. So instead, I'm going to put the sounds on the weighted platform so that if I wanted variations on different types of weighted platforms, I can just change the sound effects over here instead of in the state tree. So I'm going to remove, right click the spawn sound and delete it. For now, we'll add it back later, but I wanted to explain why I'm putting my sound on my weighted platform. It's just a more modular way to do it. So go to your weighted platform and we're going to make some variables. I think I'm going to want a start syncing sound. So as soon as we start syncing, we step on the platform right before we start moving. And I think I want a syncing sound loop as well. So let's start off with those. So hit plus on variable, start sync sound. Change the type to sound base object reference. And I don't want this to be instance editable because I don't want each individual platform to choose a different sound. I want anything using this weighted platform class to use a sound. So I want them to be consistent with each other. So start sync sound, let's give it a default. I think the one that I had chosen was, let's see, dockable. Window close, that's fine. You can choose different sounds for this. These are just reasonable ones that I found that are built into the engine. Eventually you would want a sound designer to replace these with custom sounds, or you could find some other better ones. And I'm seeing a lot of floating variables, and usually this is a sign that it's time to start cleaning up. So I'm going to make a syncing category. So under category, we'll call this syncing. I think I'm going to put, let's do sync speed. Let's put that in our syncing category as well. And you know what, while I'm at it, let's make a rise category. Let's do rising, and our rise speed is in our rising category. We'll put our sounds down here too. Okay, so syncing, we have our start sync sound. I'm going to control D to duplicate this just to make it faster. Syncing sound, this will be our looping sound that'll play as long as we're syncing. Compile, save. And for our syncing sound, let's change the default. Let me see, what do I have? VR world move loop 01. Okay, so we can always test it out here too. All right, that sounds pretty good. Okay, so we have our start sync sound, little click type sound, and then a looping sound right here. Perfect. Let's do our rising sounds. So we want to do those too. Pretty similarly, I want a start rise sound and a rising sound. I'm just going to duplicate it. It'll be a little bit faster. So Control D, call this start rise sound. I'm going to drag this down into the rising category right there, or you could reassign it over here. Either way, I'm trying to show you a couple different options on ways to do things. Control D again, and we'll call this rising sound. This will be our loop. Let's compile, save. For start rise sound, I think one that I found, it was called dockable window drop. And then our rising sound, our loop, I think I found one called teleport mode entered. Now, again, if you don't see these exact sounds, it doesn't matter. Just choose a sound that sounds good to you, but these are the ones that I chose. So we have our sounds defined on our weighted platform. We just need to hook them up. So we've already defined the 4 ones that we want. We're going to start with start sync. So as soon as we start our sync, this is our 0.3 delay. We want to play some kind of click sound, let the player know that they just stepped on something, wait for 0.3 seconds, and then it starts syncing. So click on plus, go to STT SpawnSound. Let's do our settings. We don't need to change context, but for our sound to play, going to bind to the actor and then our start sync sound. Perfect. So it's going to pull that from the one that we defined over on our weighted platform blueprint. We can attach it or not, or destroy a transition. I'm going to uncheck destroy a transition. I'm going to keep it attached just so that we can see one, variation on the setup. Make sure that it works. And then on our move, while we're in our move state, we want to play our looping. So let's do our tasks, spawn sound, and bind this to syncing sound. We do want this to be attached, and we do want to destroy this at transition because a loop will just play forever. Okay, so that one's good. Compile, save. We could play a particular sound when we hit the bottom. I'm not going to do that, but this is some extra thing you could do if you want to challenge yourself. Now, the other things we have are start, rise, and rising loop. So for our start rise, we're going to click on our rising state. We'll just add our task over here. Since we don't have the child states, we're just going to add it on this one. Choose spawn sound. And again, because we made this generic, you can see how quickly we can set this up. We'll do our sound to play as our start rise sound. For this one, we'll make it not attached, and we do not want this to destroy a transition. It'll destroy itself automatically when it's finished since it's a one shot. And I want to point out something here. If we want to play our looping sound, we could do that here, but you see right here, when we broke out our child state, we can play our start sync sound first, wait for 0.3 seconds, and then play our looping sound. We can't really do that if we're putting all of our tasks on one state like this. This is one of the downsides of doing our delayed transition instead of having a start rise child state. I'm keeping this separate to show you the differences between the setup, but this way gives you more control. Doing our child state with a brief delay as a separate thing versus rising, we're just putting everything on this one state, and we can't delay our control, right? We cannot wait for a small amount of time and then play our other sound. We just have to play both at the same time. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to put our task for spawn sound. We're going to play our start rise and our looping at the same time because I do want to hear both. But this is one of the downsides of doing the delay rather than a separate task, and I wanted to point that out. So for this setup, they're both going to play at the same time. I still think that that is fine. So we'll do our rising sound loop. Is attached, yes. Destroy a transition, yes. And I think that's it. We have our tasks. Let's test it out. Okay, perfect. So you're hearing this click with that brief delay at the start, and then it plays the syncing loop. But for the rise, you're hearing both sounds at the same time. Right? So if you did want to make that a sequence, like hear the rise, wait, and then start moving up, then you would need to separate that out. But for now, I think it's fine for me. The last thing that I wanted to point out is you'll notice inside of our state task, spawn sound, we never finished the task, right? We never marked it as succeeded. I am doing that by design. For anything cosmetic, like audio or particles or whatever that is non-crucial for the thing to function, like moving to a position, I actually don't want to finish the task, because if I did finish the task and then some of these other, like over here, when we finish playing the sound, we're going to trigger our state complete and then not finish moving, for example. So for anything that is non-essential, like spawning sounds or particles or maybe even animations or whatever, then I'm not going to finish the task. And that is just the way that I decided to set it up because it's just easier to manage. But if you did want to finish the task, then you would have to account for that when you are doing your transition. Because when you finish playing the sound, it will trigger a on state completed. So you may or may not want that. But I find that it's easier not to finish a task for sounds and for particles. So that's the reason that I'm not doing it there. But I wanted to point that out.